Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Technical Summit. As Kelsey said, let's dig into deployment and license management. This session is going to focus very specifically on everything about Microsoft Sustainability Manager. So thank you for having me today. I am Shelly Bakke, the Director of Customer and Partner Success. If you guys do have questions along the way, please do feel free to ask them in the chat. We will have a few minutes at the end of the session today where I will then make sure to ask the questions that you asked in the chat, and we will get them on the recording so that way we have them available for everyone afterwards. So please feel free to use the chat and we will get your questions answered. Okay, as we go through the next 30 minutes, we're going to talk about all things on the trial, licensing, the deployment options. We're going to demystify a lot of the questions about environment types. And then we're going to talk about how do you get access to know what's new, where the documentation is, and what's really available from our release schedule. And then, as promised, we will go through the Q&A questions at the end. So let's start off with giving everyone an opportunity to try Microsoft Sustainability Manager. So you can try Microsoft Sustainability Manager from our main page, microsoft.com/sustainability. Now, this is what we refer to as a non-admin led, or another word for it is a viral trial, which means practically anyone can sign up for it. Now, when I do say practically anyone can sign up, there are some organizations that may like to limit the trials that their users can sign up for. And that is a setting that organizations can control at their Entra ID or their tenant level. So some organizations may choose to control it at that level. And if so, then you may be blocked from signing up from the trial using that organization account. If you are not blocked, then you are able to sign up for the premium version of Microsoft Sustainability Manager. It is free for you for 30 days. If you wish, you can extend the trial for an additional 30 days. And to extend the trial for an additional 30 days, that trial can be extended at admin.powerplatform.com. And you do have to make sure that you have the appropriate rights to visit the admin portal in order to be able to extend the trial. Now, as a customer that wants to try Microsoft Sustainability Manager for 30 days, if you have decided to get rid of the sample data in the environment and you've decided to start to configure it and upload your own data, you do have the option on how you can take a trial and you can convert it to a true production environment. And I'm going to show you how you do that here in a few slides. So we'll talk about the ability for you to actually convert a trial to a production environment. Now, if you think about your licensing, and sometimes you go to look at what am I licensed for and what does the license actually look like? To look at your licenses, you go to office.com and you log into the admin portal. It's the gear icon of office.com. And once you log into the admin portal, you can look at all of your product licenses. If someone in your organization has signed up for the trial from the website, again, what we refer to as the viral trial, that is where you will see your organization is licensed for Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability vTrial, standing for that viral trial aspect. Now let's take a look at Microsoft Sustainability Manager. In about the October-November timeframe, we decided to come out to the market with two specific offerings. We came out with an offering of Microsoft Sustainability Manager Essentials, which that is 4,000 US dollars a tenant. And then we came out with an offer of Microsoft Sustainability Manager Premium, which was 12,000 US dollars per tenant. Now, the differences between these two is listed here on this page. We also, on our docs page, so on our documentation page or our Learn site, we also do have a very detailed list of the feature capability within the product to show exactly which feature is in Essentials and which feature is in Premium. This slide that you see here is meant to be kind of a high-level elevated talking pitch slide to really show the value prop of Essentials versus Premium. And as you can see from the premium capabilities, what customers get when they get premium is they get a lot of the AI capability. So they get what if analysis, intelligent insights, and maybe you could say some of the more advanced concepts, such as the product carbon footprint, the ESG value chain solution, which is helping customers gather the information from their supply chain, as well as some more of the advanced capability of restatements. Now, there are some differences in what you can do as far as calculation when it comes to the categories of Scope 3. So there's 15 different categories of Scope 3. For the premium SKU, you can calculate all 15 categories of Scope 3. For essentials, you can bring in all calculated categories of 15 categories of Scope 3, but you cannot calculate 10, 11, 14, and 15. So again, 10, 11, 14, and 15 can only be calculated in premium. So if you are calculating those categories in another solution, you can bring in those calculated numbers in Essentials, and you can use Essentials for calculating all of the other categories of Scope 3, and of course, Scope 1 and Scope 2. The other material difference that you will see here is the Dataverse capacity. So Dataverse capacity with Essentials is 10 gigabytes, and Dataverse capacity for Premium is 50 gigabytes. We also do seed some AI Builder capacity with Premium of 25,000 credits as well. Now, for you partners on the call, we do offer you the ability to get licenses for free. It's very important for you as our partners to be able to make sure that you can learn everything about the product so that way you can make sure you can demo the product for our customers. You can also be developing solutions that can help extend the capability of Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. So from that perspective, you can go out to this website, experience.dynamics.com, request license. And when you get to that website, you're going to land on a page that looks very similar to this. Obviously, you'll need to fill in all of the required fields that have an asterisk next to it. And then you'll need to choose this button called Discounted Offer. Once you choose the discounted offer, you can hover your mouse over into this box that says Selected Sandbox License. Once you click in this box, then you'll be presented with a list of the licenses that you can select. I selected both Essentials and Premium. As a partner, you can have both Essentials and Premium on your same Entra ID or on your same tenant. And we'll talk about that in more detail as well here too in just a few minutes. Now, from a licensing perspective, when you get your licenses, whether you're a customer and you purchase the licenses through a CSP, a cloud solution provider, or you buy your licenses through your volume licensing, or if you're a partner and you get your licenses through the partner sandbox, which I have done here, you're going to have two offers. One is going to be a tenant-based offer, and that is what's going to carry the monthly fee. Another is going to be a user-based offer. That user-based offer is free, but it carries entitlements. So the next slide I'm going to show you is the entitlements. Now this screenshot is a screenshot again from that office portal, which shows you your products that you have licensed. So in my demo, when I set this up, I set up a tenant that's logged in to the viral trial online. I also applied the partner sandbox for essentials, and I applied the user essentials partner sandbox, and I said I needed it for 10 users. Now remember, the essentials carries the $4,000 fee if I were a customer. The premium carries the $12,000 a month fee if I were a customer. The user license for essentials or the user license for premium is free, and you can have unlimited number of user licenses. Now, when you go to do the user assignment on assigning the user license, this is an example again in that Office portal where I am now assigning my user license of my user essentials license to myself, Shelly Bakke. So I'm assigning my user license, and here I can see all of the details of what is actually being entitled for me when I'm assigning that license. So here I see I'm getting Power App entitlement. I'm also getting Power Automate entitlement. And then I'm getting this entitlement called BizApps. Well, this BizApp entitlement is a kind of a catch-all entitlement for the ability for you to enter support cases, as well as the ability for you to get the Dataverse capacity. And if you are on a premium SKU, it also includes AI Builder credits. So the user-based license includes the Dataverse capacity, which includes database, log, and file. It includes the Power App capability. So this means that you can go out and extend the model-driven app that Microsoft Sustainability Manager is built on. It also means that you can go out and extend and add and create your own model-driven app that's looking at the the Microsoft Sustainability Manager data model. You also get full Power Automate capability. So now you can go and build some super fancy, complex workflows. You can also use Power Automate to bring data into Dataverse if you wish as well too, from a data connector perspective. And then if you are on the premium USL license, the user license, then you are seated with 25,000 AI Builder credits a month at the tenant level. And then once you have the user-based license added to your Entra ID or your tenant, then you have the ability to submit support cases. And I'll show you a screenshot here in the future too on where you can go to submit support cases as well. Now, what these licenses do not include, so let's cover this. These licenses do not include Power BI. So if you do wish, or if your customer has a need for you to create a custom Power BI dashboard, that maybe that Power BI dashboard wants different graphics. Maybe they want to connect to different data sources to bring in some different data from different KPIs. You would need to use a Power BI license for that. It also does not include M365 licenses. So if the customer wanted to have licenses for SharePoint to make sure that you've got a SharePoint online connector, you would need to have M365 licenses for that. And then also, if the customer wanted to use the Power Pages survey template to send out the survey to their suppliers, using the ESG value chain and the survey template that we ship, they would then need to make sure that they are also licensed for Power Pages appropriately, whether they are anonymous or not anonymous on the Power Pages side. And then if the customer is in essentials and they want to use the OCR detection where you can read an invoice and lift the invoice details off to ingest data in, then that essentials customer would need to procure the AI Builder credits. Okay, let's shift from licensing and talk about deploying. So there's two ways that you can deploy the product. One way is through what we call Microsoft Cloud Solution Center. And you get to Solution Center by going to solutions.microsoft.com. Now, when I went to solutions.microsoft.com, I chose sustainability. And these are some of the tiles that show up for us on sustainability. Now, you will notice here that when I logged in, for my solution center, it automatically did a license check for me because you do go through an authentication as soon as you log in to Solution Center. And when I logged in through that authentication, it noticed that I did not have a Power BI license. Therefore, I would not be able to deploy the emissions impact dashboard. However, it did notice that my tenant did have premium and essential licenses on it, which you saw from a previous screenshot, which means I would then be able to deploy premium and essentials into my tenant. Now, another way that you can also deploy environments into your system is through the Power Platform Admin Center, and that is through admin.powerplatform.com. And to do a deployment, you go to Resources, Dynamics 365 Apps, and then I always like to take a little shortcut here, and in this upper right corner, there's a search bar where I just type in sustainability, and that really narrows down the list of apps that I have in my list. And these are all of the sustainability components then that I can install into my environment. Then, depending on if you want to install some Microsoft Sustainability Manager Essentials or Premium into your environment, you can then simply choose these three dots, select the environment, and then go ahead and do your installation. Now, remember a way back when we were talking about how you could convert a trial to a production. Here are some screenshots to show you how to do that. So this is a screenshot of your list of environments from the Power Platform Admin Center. So notice that you have environment types. So here's an environment type of default. Here's also an environment type of a trial. It's telling me that I have 30 days remaining. So when I took this screenshot right when I had signed up for the trial. So I have 30 days remaining on my trial. If I click into that trial environment, now I see that I am in my sustainability trial. If I go to convert to production, the very first thing it's going to check for on my tenant or my Entra ID is to make sure I am licensed properly. So do I have essentials or premium? And do I have Dataverse capacity on my tenant in order for me to create that environment to stand it up properly? Because now the environment type will change from trial to production. If neither of these are in place, you will get an error and you will not be able to actually convert the environment to a production environment. And then this screenshot at the bottom here is just a reminder that we do keep a little ticker within the actual application itself as a reminder and a countdown for when your trial will end. So that way, as users, you always know when you may need to go in and extend the trial if needed. And remember, you can go in and extend a 30-day trial for an additional 30 days. Okay, so let's look at some deployment tips and tricks. So when you first get your Power Platform environment and you first log into Power Platform environment, there's always this Microsoft default with a type of default. Never ever install into the type of default environment. We know that there are services that we have that do not run in a type default environment. For example, reports will not render if you install in a default environment. So make sure whenever you go to install and into Microsoft Sustainability Manager into an environment, you never select the type of default. Also, when you go to install Microsoft Sustainability Manager and you go to create a new environment, the next step is to choose the region. You must make sure that you only install Microsoft Sustainability Manager into regions where MSM is supported. And today, there's a long list of regions that where Power Platform is supported, but these are the only regions where Microsoft Sustainability Manager is currently supported. So if I were today to select from the region list Japan, I would get an error message about regional availability. And that's because Microsoft Sustainability Manager is currently not available in the Japan data center. So you can only install into these regions. Now, we are always listening to our customers and our partners on where the demand is and where the need is, and we are always open to expanding to more regions. So this is not going to be an exclusive list. We are always open to expanding to more regions. So please give us your feedback. We want to make sure that we are meeting your needs of where the customers are. Now, there's another scenario too that I want to make sure you are aware of is there's another known issue. The other known issue is, and I'll give you an example of, let's say that, let's say your tenant is in Austria and your tenant is based in Austria and we do not have a data center in Austria. And we do not have an MSM deployment in Austria either. So from that perspective, when you try to deploy to the Europe data center, that customer may get an error message then saying, hey, there is no regional availability here. What you need to do is just enter a support case, and we just need to mark that customer's tenant of being globally aware. Then that customer with their tenant in Austria will then be able to deploy into any data center region. So it is a Power Platform limitation that we are aware of. It is only something that our support team can enable. So if you do run into a situation where you get an error message about regional availability, please do just submit a support case and our team will be there to help you. On some deployment tips and tricks, you can deploy several different environment types. So here we see I've got a tenant here where I have production and multiple different sandbox environments. A common question that we get from people is, do I have to buy a $4,000 SKU for each environment? And no, that is not the case. You buy the SKU of $4,000 or $12,000 per the tenant. Then you are only limited by the Dataverse capacity. So if you buy the essentials and you have 10 gig database capacity and you reach that 10 gig of Dataverse capacity and you want another environment, you can buy additional Dataverse capacity. That's what you would do. You don't need to go out and buy an additional $4,000 SKU. So you buy the SKU per the tenant, and then the tenant allows you to deploy multiple environments of sandbox, developer, or production, and you can have multiple environments up to what you are limited at from a capacity perspective. And then from that capacity, once it's reached, you can go ahead and purchase additional capacity. A common question we get is, hey, I'm already on Essentials. I want to upgrade to Premium. What do I do? It's super easy. What you need to do then is ensure that your tenant is licensed for Premium. So you purchase the Premium Step-Up SKU to move you from Essentials to Premium. Then you can install Premium into the same environment where Essentials is installed. So now you don't have any loss of data. You now have all of the great features and the great capability that you have in that same environment. Now you have all of the Premium capabilities turned on for you. Today, we do not support the downgrade scenario of moving from Premium to Essentials. That is coming in June. So in June, if we have customers that are on Premium and they want to move down to Essentials, we will be supporting that in June. Trials, when customers sign up for trials, they are always the Premium version. Now, for those of you that were available and sat in on our earlier session with Brandon, this is a great reminder that our momentum continues to accelerate and we continue to ship our updates every month. So you can go out to our Cloud for Sustainability blog to learn more about what we ship each month. You can also find about our updates within the product itself on the homepage by clicking on Explore New Product Features. When you click on the link of Explore New Product Features, it takes you out to the What's New in Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. This link takes you directly to our learning documentation and our learning page. It will take you to the current month, which for this month is May, where you can learn more about everything that we are shipping. And one last call out here is where you can go to get support and help. If you are in the Microsoft Cloud Solution Center, in the left navigation pane where I selected sustainability, notice we have an area up here for support. This is where you can select the support tile and then choose from the list Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability. If you are in the Power Platform Admin Center, again, on that left navigation page, you can select Help and Support, and that is then also where you can choose Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability to select your support case and get that submitted for us. We also have a free Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability community page. This is a great opportunity for you to connect with your peers and ask questions. We would love to get our community page built up with experts. Our team, our customer and partner success team, as well as the other engineers that you're going to be hearing from today, do go out here and look for questions. We help answer questions out here of the community, as well as we ask ideas and ask questions of the community as well too. So please go out here and post your questions and also look for ways to provide your feedback as well.